Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I'm going to be walking you through a creative form drawing lesson with my daughter who is 8 years old. We started this form drawing unit quite some time ago and we're just now getting back into it, so we're a little bit rough around the edges. Okay, so this is officially lesson 11, but what's nice about the book, and actually let me tell you a little bit about the book for a minute. This is creative form drawing. This is something you're going to find especially in the Waldorf curriculum. Now our curriculum, the live education curriculum, already comes with form drawing from first grade to, I want to say, all the younger grades until maybe third or fourth grade. But there are only a few lessons for each of the grades. And by a few, I mean probably around 10 lessons, I would say. You can definitely stretch them out or you can consolidate them. But I do highly recommend that you do give form drawing a chance and really kind of dive into it wholeheartedly to really get the benefits of form drawing that aren't just great for pre-handwriting skills and drawing, but for other things as well. Okay, so this book, what I like about it is that you're going to get so many options for lessons. And what's really nice is that you do not have to do one entire section as a lesson. Let me just show you where we're at now so I can explain how this is going to look. Yeah, you made those ones. Oh no, I'm sorry. I made those ones. I did. I think this one is your book right here. My daughter has joined us. So we're working on this section right here called flowing lines. And we have already done this a couple of times, and I feel like we're going to need several more lessons in this section. So you can see how what could look like one lesson could really be multiple lessons. So this book is for ages 6 to 10 years old. It's workbook 1. It is Creative Form Drawing by Angela Lord. There's also workbook 2 as well as some other books in this series. And there are some pre-lesson activities that are recommended. You can either walk the lines or just use your hand and kind of mimic what the lines are going to look like or the curves are going to look like. And you can always tell a story with your form drawings. And the story I previously told for this lesson didn't go so well. Do you want to decorate your front page? And so I am going to try to come up with a new story for today's lesson. Okay. In general, I would say that you aren't showing the lesson to the child for what you're going to be doing that day, but for the purposes of this video and because this is not exactly my skill set, you can see what I'm going to be copying. So previously we worked on these flowing lines and we did several of these ones. We did not do this one and we did go ahead and attempt this one. We're going to review these ones again today, but I'm going to approach it a little bit differently from what I did last time. Okay. Let me put this aside. You can continue working on that. Let me show our main lesson books. These main lesson books are 12 inches by 9 inches. I don't have centimeters on this one to show you. And you can find these at various Waldorf vendors. I believe these ones were from either a Child's Dream or Waldorf Supplies. You can find the links to all of the materials that we've used down in the description box below, as well as on the blog post that accompanies this video. Okay, let's go all the way to the end. Hey, do you know what we forgot to do last time? There's one thing that I completely forgot to do, and I'm wondering if you know what it is. No. Okay, well, I'm gonna take green today because I'm feeling like the greens and yellows. Do you know what we forgot to do last time? Forgot to make a border. So I'm gonna make a border here. I'm gonna use the block crayon. Oh yeah.
Can we switch?
Switch color. Oh yeah. Sorry. Okay. Can I help? Oh, wait. Can I help you with this? Because that's not right at the crease. Okay. There you go. So these are the block Stockmar crayons. We also have our stick crayons, and we also have 2 sets, so we can each, well, you know, because we have 4 kids. Okay, so we're gonna continue.
You said we. You.
You're right. Let's go ahead and continue. You know what I was thinking about the other day, actually this morning, is what these lines remind me of. I'm gonna draw one first here, but I want you to wait before you draw yours, okay? I want to tell you what this line reminds me of. It's a flowy line that has kind of a crest and a valley.
Mountain.
And they're about the equal size for each of these crests and valleys. And because I have a border here and because this is quite wide, I wasn't able to get more than just 2.5 in here. Is it okay if I draw you the very first one? Okay, I'm actually glad you used this purple color because what I was thinking of was all of the beads that I had on a pillow. And the pillow, the fabric just started ripping and all the beads started to fall off. And I really, really loved the beads because they were so beautiful.
I took the beads off.
Yes, you did. And then I took the rest of them off. And these are the beads. And I thought they were so pretty and I wanted to keep them.
You put them in.
I wanted to string them so that we could turn it into a bracelet because they were such pretty, pretty, pretty beads. And they were in this really beautiful plum color, almost the color of my shirt. And when we started drawing this, and when I thought that we would do this again today, the first image that came into my mind, 1 second, baby cakes, was if we had strung up all the beads and put them on a thread, and then we laid them down, we could easily get the same shape. And so I wanted to do that with you today, but the only problem was that these beads are really, really tiny, and I don't know that I have a needle that's tiny enough to thread these beads. But if I do, then I want us to do this afterwards. But before you continue, can I do one for you again here? Because these look like sound waves.
Can I do one more?
Can I do it so that we can get more of like this shape?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you want to just do it and follow this shape?
Sure. Again.
I'm going to do it down here so that you can, and I'm going to make it a little bit tighter so you can get some more forms in. And I'm going to take my yellow and come right underneath. And you know what I find difficult is following the same shape going in this direction. I actually find it a lot easier. Do you want to try going in this direction? Because I feel like it's a lot easier when you've already traced it to go in a different direction.
To go one direction and the other direction and the other direction? Like
well, suppose I do a new form down here. And you may need to turn your paper over to do this and draw a new border. But suppose I do... I really like yours too. I'm going to explain another form while you do a border here because I don't need to do another border. But if I'm doing a brand new form, like suppose I'm doing it really tight, which is actually pretty challenging, it's easier for me to not follow another form and go from left to right. But if I'm going to follow the form, it's easier for me to go from right to left, and it is really challenging following this form.
Okay, can you do one for me?
Sure. Do you want a soft, like I'll call this one soft and this one tight, or this one loose and tight? Do you want a loose flowy line or a tight flowy line?
Middle.
Ooh. There you go. There once was a little girl who had a beautiful bracelet made of beads
You talked about now.
that were like glass. They were glass beads. And they were really tiny, just like the ones that I showed you. But they were in all different colors. Even more than the colors of the rainbow. Some sparkled like gold and silver, some were clear like water, and some were as brightly colored like the flowers, and some even looked like they could be berries. But she knew not to eat them because they were glass beads. And the little girl loved this bracelet so much that she wore it every single day. And one day, the clasp on her bracelet broke. And while she was out playing, she lost her bracelet. And she didn't notice right at first because she was so busy playing. But then she came home and she got ready for bed. She climbed under the blankets and she started to fall asleep when she remembered that her bracelet was not on her anymore. Because as she fell asleep, as she would fall asleep at night, she would like to take the bracelet in her hand and just feel each of the beads smooth between her fingers. And she would slide over one bead and try to guess what color it was. But it was nighttime, so of course she couldn't see the colors, but she would just guess what color it was. And as the lights were off and the moon wasn't bright, she only just had to guess. And she would guess, oh, this bead is yellow like the sun. And then she would think about the sun and her day when she would be out playing with the sunshine and the birds and the flowers that would be yellow like the sun. And then she would fall asleep. And the next night she would do the same thing. And she would run her fingers over the smooth glass beads and she would guess what color it was. But as there was no light and no moonlight, she could only guess. And she would say, I think this is the blue bead. Blue like the bright blue sky in the middle of the summer. And it's so wonderful to be out in the fields, lying on the grass, looking up at the blue sky. And she would create a whole story and fall asleep. And the next night she would do the same thing. And the next night she would do the same thing. But now she doesn't have her bracelet. And her eyes welled up with tears because she loved that bracelet so, so much. She couldn't fall asleep the whole night. And when she finally did fall asleep, she had terrible dreams. She woke up and she just still felt awful. She came down to breakfast and she didn't want to eat anything. And her mother said, what's the matter? And the little girl says, I've lost my bracelet. And the mother felt so bad for her little child. She said, I'll make you another one. And so the whole day the mother was busy making a bracelet for her daughter, but her daughter didn't want that one. She wanted the one that she lost. So she took a basket with some apples and some bread, even though she wasn't even hungry for them, and she went off into the woods where she played, and she wanted to look for her bracelet. So with her head down and her eyes scanning the forest floor, she looked everywhere for her beads. And in that moment, she wished she had eyes like a hawk, because those eyes are so sharp, and they can see even the slightest movement from a mouse from hundreds of feet away. But alas, she only had 8-year-old eyes, and she scanned as much as she could. And she could not find her beaded bracelet anywhere. And she came home, and her mother presented her with a new bracelet. But the little girl just had a long face. I don't want this bracelet. I want my old bracelet. And the mother's heart broke because she felt so sad for her daughter. She put the beautiful new bracelet aside and tucked her daughter in to sleep at night, and told her a beautiful story about butterflies and rainbows. Beautiful. But the daughter did not care about the story one bit. And she tossed and turned that night and could not sleep The next morning she got up and she did not want breakfast. And the mother felt so sad for her daughter. Oh no, what am I going to do? So the mother accompanied the little girl and they went out into the woods behind the house, and together with 2 sets of eyes they scanned the forest floor. But alas, they did not have eyes like the hawk, and they could not find the bracelet anywhere, because alas, they only had 8-year-old eyes and mother eyes. So together they walked back home with long faces and tears in their eyes. And they got back home and they made a bowl of soup, and they sat there with tears practically dripping into their soup. And the mother walked the little girl back upstairs, tucked her in to sleep, and told her a story about the ocean and how the ocean was filled with water. And they were so salty because they were the tears of all the little girls who had lost their bracelets in all of time. And the little girl knew that wasn't true. But still, she listened to the story that her mama said, and then she fell asleep. And she didn't sleep very well that night. She had horrible dreams about sea monsters coming up from the depths of the ocean, breaking through the waves like this. So she finally woke up, and before the sun was even up, she marched outside when everything was still dewy and it was foggy and it was so cold. And she marched through that forest one last time. And she looked under every rock and under every mushroom and under all the moss that covered the sides of the path. And yet she could not find it anywhere. How? Why? Where could this bracelet be?
By her hand.
She finally gave up and was walking back home when a thought occurred to her. How silly of me, she said. I've been looking down at the ground this whole time. But what if my bracelet is not on the ground? What if one of these beautiful shrubs caught my bracelet and has been wearing it the whole time? What if one of these beautiful flowers has had a necklace of my bracelet this whole time? What if one of these branches has tugged on my bracelet this whole time? So with renewed energy and spirit, the girl marched back into the forest, and this time, without her eyes looking straight down at the ground, she stared right at eye level, all around her, and then she let her gaze fall a little bit lower, so it was right at hip level, and she walked slowly and scanned her eyes back and forth, and then scanned her eyes slightly up and slightly down, and slightly up and slightly down, and slightly to the left and slightly to the right. And do you know what happened?
Yes.
Do you think she found the bracelet?
Yes.
Do you know where she found the bracelet?
Yes.
Where?
No.
No? She found it on a beautiful rose bush, which was really unusual because there were no roses in the forest. This was a wild rose, and it had thorns on its branches. And at this time of year, there were no roses on it. It was almost as if it was like a blackberry bush. And there, hanging on one of the thorny branches, was her beautiful bracelet, all dewy in the morning coolness. And just as the sun was peeking through all the fog, a ray of sunlight fell onto her beautiful bracelet, and in that moment, it completely shone with light. And she picked up the bracelet, and she put it back on her hand, on her wrist, and she clasped it really tightly. And she didn't just walk back to her mother. She ran. She sprinted through the forest, But every now and then, she gazed down at her arm to make sure her bracelet was still there. And when she burst through the doors of her little cabin, her mama was right there with her, holding the other bracelet in her hand. And they embraced each other so tightly. And then the mom gave her the other bracelet and put it on her other arm. And now the little girl has 2 bracelets. I really like what you did here.
Thanks.
Do you want to help me finish mine? Do you want to use my colors or different colors?
Can you do another line, like a blue one and another one?
What kind of line do you want? Okay, so we're going to end the lesson here, and we are closing it out on a high note. And if you saw lesson number 10, the previous lesson before this, then you'll know that we struggled quite a bit getting our form. So I want to offer a few reflections on the way that I approached this lesson versus the previous lesson. That one, yeah, this one was hers. And we had, so you can see just the improvement over one day, and this lesson is literally the following day. Form drawing lessons don't need to literally follow the next day. You can do them a couple of times a week if you'd like, but I just want to show how much improvement there was just in one day. And you're going to see that a lot when the child has the opportunity to rest and literally sleep and let this information rest with them, and then it comes back to the surface the following day. You're going to find that a lot of learning that didn't seem to happen in the moment did happen. Like it was subconscious. It was being digested. It was being reflected upon in a way that the child wasn't super aware of, so that the following day or the following lesson, you can see that that lesson did have an impact on the child. Now, if you wait too long between lessons, you won't really see those benefits. But if you're doing the lessons regularly, every day, every other day, every third day, then you're definitely going to see some of those benefits. I decided to tell a different story this time around. If you remember the story that I told previously, it was based on, reality. It was just based on, driving up on the coast and looking at the water and seeing these, and my daughter just was not having any bit of that story. And so this time around, I just, impromptu told a story. I did want it to have the element of the bracelet. I had pre-thought about that when I was thinking about the form and not wanting to then use the same imagery of the ocean. I was thinking about, well, how could we do a pre-lesson activity that has to do with this form? And I was thinking, it'd be great if we could do some bracelets and then just lay them out and kind of shape that into this form. And then I realized I didn't have the right needles for that, and so I just still drew on that story. Now, we did far fewer forms for this lesson, and the story took up the majority of the time, and I feel like that's just fine for this lesson. My daughter did 2 pages of forms while she listened to the story, and I can't multitask, so I had to stop doing my forms in order to tell the story. For me, telling stories off the top of my head, as well as any kind of artistic representation, like a drawing something on a blank page and just having to come up with it on my own, is really difficult for me. And so it just takes like all my faculty to focus and put something together. And I was really pleased with the story that I came up with on the spot. I tried to include some of the storytelling principles that I've learned going through our different Waldorf conferences and seminars. The repetition, I tried to include the imagery, trying to meet my daughter's temperament. Right now she has a lot of melancholy and choleric kind of coming through. So I had the story have a lot of sadness in it, even though it had a happy ending, which was totally predictable. I would not have done a sad ending. I don't think that that's appropriate for young children. So even though it was predictable and she knew it was coming, I still did not want to have any twists and turns at the end of the story, but I did have a lot of sadness throughout the story. And I think that that is appropriate for meeting her temperament. I could be wrong, but that is where I went with it today. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed this lesson. Do check out the book called Creative Form Drawing by Angela Lord if you want to do these lessons with your children or even on your own. There are some form drawing exercises that you can do as an adult. It's very therapeutic. I really enjoy it myself. And if you want to check out some of the other form drawing tutorials that I have, you can tap on the screen right now. You can find that link down in the description box below. And you can also head over to my website at pepperandpine.com to see all of the tutorials, as well as more information about the materials that we've used. And if you want to see how our homeschool is progressing on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at pepperandpine.